It all started with a simple business trip. I had to go to a remote area of Virginia for work, and my company booked an Airbnb for me to stay in for the weekend. The place seemed perfect, a secluded farmhouse surrounded by woods. I didn't think twice when I saw the listing. It was a steal for the price, and the reviews were mostly positive. In hindsight, I wish I'd paid more attention to the few offhand comments about the quietness of the place. But, like any naive traveler, I just shrugged it off as rural charm. When I arrived, the house was even more isolated than the photos had suggested. The driveway was long, winding through a dense forest, and the farmhouse itself had a certain old-world charm. It looked like something out of a Gothic novel. Cracked windows, ivy crawling up the walls, and an eerie stillness in the air. The host, a woman named Valerie, greeted me warmly. She was in her mid-40s, thin, with sharp eyes that never quite made eye contact. She seemed friendly enough at first, explaining how everything worked and handing me a set of keys, but there was something about her manner that made me uncomfortable. Maybe it was her overly familiar tone or how she insisted on showing me around every corner of the house, even the rooms I wouldn't be using. After she left, I felt a strange tension hanging in the air. The house creaked and groaned as though it had a life of its own. I tried to shake off the unease, reminding myself I was just being paranoid. The next few hours were spent preparing for my meeting the following day, but I couldn't stop looking out the windows, seeing nothing but the dense woods. It was a beautiful landscape, sure, but there was an oppressive quality to the isolation. Around midnight, I decided to take a walk outside to clear my head. The air was cold and still, and the crunch of dead leaves underfoot was the only sound. As I wandered to the edge of the forest, I noticed something odd. A faint light flickering in the distance. It was coming from the woods, beyond the tree line. I didn't think much of it at first. Maybe someone was out there, maybe a hunter or another traveler. But as I watched the light, I realized it wasn't moving like it should. It was as though it was waiting, watching. A sudden chill ran down my spine. I turned to head back to the house but froze. There, standing in the doorway, was Valerie. How had she gotten out there without me hearing? My heart pounded. She wasn't even looking at me. Instead, her gaze was fixed toward the woods, the same direction I had been looking. "You should go inside," she said softly, almost too quietly. "The woods aren't a place for you tonight." I stood frozen, unsure of what to say. She didn't elaborate, just turned and walked back into the house without another word. But the unease, the feeling of being watched, only intensified. Something wasn't right, and it wasn't just the house. That night I tried to sleep, but I couldn't. I kept hearing things, scratching sounds, like nails on wood, faint whispers in the dark, too soft to understand but too real to ignore. At some point, I must have dozed off, because I was jolted awake by the distinct sound of footsteps moving through the house. I grabbed my phone and texted Valerie, asking if everything was okay. The text went through, but she didn't reply. The footsteps got louder, closer. I could hear them moving from room to room, as though someone was pacing back and forth, just outside my door. My heartbeat raced as I realized I was alone in this house, or so I thought. I pulled the covers over my head, trying to stay as still as possible. The sound of footsteps stopped right outside my room, and there was silence. Then, a voice, cold and low, like it came from deep within the walls, whispered, "Leave before it's too late." I didn't wait for a second invitation. I grabbed my things and bolted out of the room, heading straight for the front door. But when I tried to open it, it was locked. I yanked and pulled on the handle, panicking, but the door wouldn't budge. Through the crack in the door, I could see Valerie standing in the hallway, her back turned to me. "You're not going anywhere," she said, her voice distorted, unnatural. I backed away from the door, my mind racing. How had she locked it from the outside? How had she gotten inside without me hearing her? Suddenly, there was a loud crash from downstairs, followed by the unmistakable sound of something heavy dragging across the floor. It was as if something or someone was trying to break in. I rushed to the windows, but the forest outside was just as dark and oppressive as before. I had nowhere to run. Then, I heard Valerie's voice again, this time from the staircase. It's not just the house. It's me. It's always been me. Before I could even process what she meant, the light flickered out, plunging me into darkness. And in that moment, I realized I was never meant to leave. I'm telling you this now, hoping someone will hear it before they make the same mistake I did. If you ever book a place on Airbnb, especially in remote areas, be careful. Because sometimes, the place you're staying isn't just haunted by memories. It's haunted by the people who want you to stay forever. And if you hear footsteps in the night, don't wait to see who's behind the door. Just run. I don't know how long I stood there, frozen, staring at the door. Time felt like it was stretching and warping, as though everything around me was moving in slow motion. My heart was pounding in my chest, and the silence had turned into a suffocating pressure, wrapping around me like a vice. I couldn't hear the footsteps anymore, but I knew they were still out there. Desperation set in. I had to get out, no matter the cost. I turned around and looked for another way out of the room. Any other way. My eyes landed on the small window by the bed. It was narrow, too small for me to fit through, but maybe I could break it open. I grabbed the lamp from the nightstand, holding it with shaking hands. My mind was racing with possibilities. Could I climb out of the window? Could I find a way to signal someone for help? Or would I be forced to confront whatever was lurking in the house with me? I didn't even know if anyone would hear me scream. I swung the lamp toward the window with all my strength. The glass shattered in an instant, and the sound was deafening. My heart nearly stopped as I heard a voice from the hallway, colder now, like it was coming from the depths of a grave. You can't escape. I didn't hesitate. I crawled through the broken window, cutting my hands on the glass as I scrambled out into the night. The cold air hit me like a slap, but I didn't care. I could feel the hairs on the back of my neck standing on end, as though something was watching me from the darkness. I didn't look back. I ran as fast as I could, through the thick woods surrounding the house. Branches whipped against my face, and I stumbled over rocks and fallen logs, but I couldn't stop. I kept hearing the voice, the whispering, like it was echoing through the trees, getting louder and louder. Leave before it's too late. I pushed through the underbrush, desperate to find any sign of civilization. But the farther I ran, the more it felt like the woods were closing in on me. The trees seemed to grow thicker, the shadows deeper. Every time I thought I saw a break in the trees ahead, it would vanish as quickly as it appeared. It was like the forest itself was shifting, trapping me. And then, just when I thought I might collapse from exhaustion, I saw headlights in the distance. A car. A real, living person. I ran toward it with everything I had left in me. The car was parked on the side of the road, a figure standing next to it. I didn't care who it was. I just needed help. I reached the car, gasping for breath, my hands shaking. The person turned around, and I froze. It was Valerie. She was standing there, smiling, her eyes wide and manic. "I told you," she said softly, her voice almost a purr. "You can never leave." I screamed and stumbled backward, but before I could react, something grabbed me from behind, yanking me into the woods. I fought, kicking and clawing, but the grip was like iron. My body was being dragged, and I couldn't see what was pulling me. It was like I was in the grip of some unseen force. The last thing I remember was Valerie's face, her cold, twisted smile as I was pulled deeper into the forest. And then, nothing. When I woke up, I was back in the house, the farmhouse. It was as if the last few hours had never happened. My body felt heavy, like I was in a fog, but I was lying on the same bed I had left in a panic hours before. Everything was eerily still, and the silence was almost suffocating. I staggered to my feet, disoriented. How had I gotten here? Had I imagined everything? But then I saw it. The shattered window, the broken lamp, the blood on my hands. It wasn't a dream. I had to get out. Now, I raced down the stairs, toward the front door. But when I reached it, the handle didn't move. It was locked again. The house was alive. It was playing with me. I heard Valerie's voice again, faint but unmistakable. "You're mine now, forever." I banged on the door, screaming for help, but no one came. The air was thick with dread, and I could feel it. The house was alive, feeding off my fear. It knew what I was thinking. I wasn't the first to try and leave, and I wouldn't be the last. The house, the woods, Valerie, none of it was real. Not anymore. It was as though they had become one with the very fabric of the place. I don't know how long it's been since that night. Days? Weeks? The house doesn't seem to age. Neither do I. But I'm telling you this, if you ever come across an Airbnb listing in the woods, something that seems too good to be true, don't go. Don't make the same mistake I did. Because once you step inside, you're never leaving. You're just another lost soul, trapped by a house that never lets go. And I'm telling you this now because I don't think I can stay here much longer. The house is hungry again. It's waiting for its next victim. So if you ever find yourself in a place like this, turn around, walk away, or you might never leave. I thought I had reached the end of it. I thought it was over, that maybe the nightmare was behind me. But I was wrong. Oh, how wrong I was. I woke up again today, if you can even call it waking up. The feeling is so hard to describe, like being stuck in a place that isn't quite real, but you can't leave. You just can't. Every time I try to move, the house, the damn house, pulls me back in. It's like it has a mind of its own. It knows what I'm thinking, what I'm planning, even before I do. There's no escape. Every door I try to open leads me to another hallway I don't remember walking down. Every window I try to look out of shows nothing but more trees. Trees that never seem to end. A forest stretching forever, trapping me. I'm starting to think that Valerie isn't just the host. She's something else. Something older, something far more sinister. I've tried to ask her what this place is, but she just smiles. That smile. It's the same smile she had the night I tried to leave, twisted and cold. Like she knows something I'll never understand. She told me once, in a voice that made my skin crawl, "You don't leave here. You belong to it now." I didn't believe her. I wanted to scream at her, tell her she was crazy, but something in her eyes, something in her cold, dead eyes, made me freeze. Today I decided to search the house. Really search it. I've been so afraid to look deeper, but now I'm desperate. I need answers. I need to know how to break free from whatever hell this is. I found something, an old diary. It was tucked away in the attic, hidden under a pile of dust and cobwebs. I wasn't expecting much, just another relic of a time long past, maybe written by someone else who had stayed here. But this was different. It was Valerie's handwriting. I could tell by the way the letters looped, smooth and elegant. But the words inside, they sent a chill through my bones. I know what they did to me. They took me from the city, from the life I had. And now I am part of the land. The house is alive. It breathes. It feeds. I am its servant. And anyone who stays here becomes part of it too. The entries went on. They didn't make sense at first, but the more I read, the clearer it became. This house, this land, it had been here for centuries, built on something dark, something evil. And Valerie, she wasn't the first person to be consumed by it. She had been drawn in just like I had, but she hadn't left. No, she had become one with the house, a vessel for its power. And now she was in charge. She wasn't just a hostess. She was its guardian, its keeper, and its seducer. I could feel my pulse quicken as I read further. Tonight, I will find my next one. They always come. They always stay. They never leave. My hands were shaking. The reality of it hit me like a truck. I wasn't just dealing with a haunted house. I was dealing with something ancient, something hungry, something that needed to feed on fear, on souls. And I was next. I could hear Valerie's voice downstairs, calling my name, sweet and mocking. I closed the diary and tried to calm myself, but the words kept echoing in my mind. They always stay. They never leave. I knew then what I had to do. I had to leave, no matter the cost. I had to find a way to escape, to break free of whatever grip this place had on me. But when I went downstairs, I realized something else. Valerie was standing in the doorway, her smile wide, stretching impossibly. The light flickered behind her, casting an eerie glow across her face. She wasn't the same as she had been before. No, something was wrong. Something was different. Her eyes were darker, more hollow, like they were empty. "You thought you could leave?" she whispered. Her voice was a low growl, and I could feel the weight of it pressing down on me. "You belong to the house now. Forever." I turned and bolted for the back door, my feet pounding on the floorboards. I had no plan, no escape route in mind. I just needed to get out. But as I reached the door, it slammed shut with a force that shook the walls. I turned, panic clawing at my chest, and there she was, standing between me and the only exit. "You can't leave. No one does." Her face was different now, more twisted, like it was contorted by some unseen force. Her features stretched and warped, becoming something monstrous. Her voice, it wasn't her voice anymore. It was low, guttural, like the very house was speaking through her. "You think you're special?" she hissed. "You think you can just walk away from this place? You can't. You never could." I backed away slowly, every nerve screaming at me to run, but my legs wouldn't move. I was trapped, again. And then I saw it. Behind her, the walls of the house, the very ones I had thought were solid, began to shift. The house itself was alive, and it was closing in on me. The room grew darker, colder, and I felt the walls pressing in, suffocating me. I'm still here, right now, writing this, but I know it won't be long. The house is getting closer. It knows I'm trying to escape. It knows I'm planning my next move, but every time I think I can get out, it pulls me back in. If you're reading this, if you're even still alive after hearing my story, know this place, it's not just a house. It's a prison, a trap, and I'm not the first, and I won't be the last. So if you find an Airbnb in the woods, if you find yourself standing at the threshold of a house that feels wrong, don't ignore that feeling. Don't stay. Don't even think about it. Because once you step inside, it's too late. You will never leave. I can feel it now. The air has changed. It's heavier, thicker, suffocating. The house is alive, but it's not the kind of life you think of. It's not the life of a house that has memories or of a house that holds stories. No, this house feeds. It thrives off fear, off the souls that walk through its doors. And it has fed on me. For days now, I've been trapped. But it's not just me. I see others, or at least, I think I do. Sometimes, I catch glimpses of them. Figures in the corners of my vision, shadows moving in the periphery, always just out of reach. They're like me, but they're different now. They're twisted. Their faces are pale, their eyes empty, and they never speak. They just stare at me as if they want me to join them, to become one of them. I tried to talk to them once. It was late, the house was quiet. Too quiet. I was sitting in the dining room, my mind numb, when I saw one of them. A man, maybe in his 40s, dressed in an old, faded suit. He was sitting at the far end of the room, his hands folded in his lap. His face was gaunt, his eyes sunken. I approached him, my steps tentative, but he didn't move. He didn't even look up. Are you alive?" I asked, my voice trembling. He didn't answer. He just stared straight ahead, like he was trapped in a trance. I reached out to touch his shoulder, to try and get some kind of response, but the moment my fingers brushed his skin, I felt it. Cold. So cold, it sent an electric shock through my arm, freezing me in place. His skin was like ice, like death itself. And then he turned his head. His eyes locked onto mine, and I couldn't breathe. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. I understood everything in that moment. The look in his eyes was an invitation to join them. I stumbled back, my heart pounding, but it wasn't just him. I felt it deep in my bones. The house was shifting again, its walls closing in, pressing tighter, like it was eager for me to give in, to become one of the lost souls that roam these halls forever. That's when I realized the house wasn't just trying to keep me here. It was trying to make me one of them. It wanted me to be trapped, but not just as a prisoner. It wanted me to be another face in the crowd of the forgotten. I ran again. This time, I didn't care where I went. I didn't care about the front door or the back door or the windows. I just needed to get away from the eyes, from the souls who watched me with their hollow stares. But as I moved through the house, the hallways twisted, becoming unfamiliar. The rooms I passed looked different. Shadows longer, corners darker, and the air growing thicker with each step. I thought I was moving toward the exit, but every time I turned a corner, I was back where I started. That's when I realized I wasn't in the house anymore. I was part of it. It was the most horrifying thing I've ever experienced. The house was no longer a physical space. It was a labyrinth of consciousness. It had invaded my mind. The walls were no longer just wood and plaster. They were thoughts, memories, desires, asterisk feeling star. The house was inside me, whispering to me, wrapping around my mind like a vice, twisting and warping everything I knew. I tried to scream, to fight it, but my body felt like it was no longer my own. My legs wouldn't move the way I wanted them to. My hands wouldn't obey. And then I heard the whisper, "Welcome home." It was Valerie's voice, but it wasn't. It was deeper, darker. It was the voice of the house itself. I turned around, and there she was, standing at the end of the hallway, smiling that same smile. Her eyes were no longer just hollow. They were black, completely void, like two endless pits. The same pits that had swallowed all those before me. "You're one of us now," she said softly, her voice like a lullaby. "You'll never leave. You'll never want to." I wanted to scream. I wanted to run. But deep down, I knew it was true. I knew that the house had won. It had consumed me, just like it had consumed everyone else who had dared to stay. The walls seemed to pulse around me, breathing in time with my heartbeat. I could feel the house growing, spreading through every inch of my body, every fiber of my being. It was in my bones, in my blood. And in that moment, I understood. I wasn't going to die here. No, I was going to become the house. Just another voice, just another soul trapped forever in its dark embrace. I've stopped trying to escape, but maybe you can. Maybe, if you're smart, if you're brave enough to turn around and walk away before it's too late, you might make it out. But if you do, if you ever make that mistake, just know this: the house is waiting. It's always waiting. And once it gets its claws into you, you will never escape. You'll just be another lost soul. Forever. I've been here for what feels like an eternity now, yet every day feels like the first. The house doesn't let you mark time. It's cruel in that way. Every moment, every hour, every night bleeds into the next, and the sensation of being stuck, of being lost in time, grows more suffocating with each passing breath. I can still hear it, the house. It whispers to me constantly, calling my name, beckoning me deeper into its labyrinth. First, I fought it. I fought the pull, the overwhelming desire to simply give in and let it consume me entirely. But I stopped fighting a long time ago. Now I just exist. But I can still feel the presence of the other souls, the ones that came before me. I can feel them around me, hovering, just out of reach. Their eyes never leave me. They follow me in the hallways, in the corners of every room. Their presence is a heavy, oppressive weight that clings to my skin like dirt. I don't know how many there are anymore, or how long they've been here. I wonder if they even remember when they were alive, or if they, too, gave up fighting. I saw one of them again today. It was a woman, maybe in her 30s, with dark, hollow eyes. Her face was gaunt, like she hadn't eaten in days or years. She stood in the hallway just outside my room, motionless, her head tilted in that unsettling way, as though she was waiting for something. I tried to call to her, to get her attention, but she didn't respond. She just stared. But I know she's waiting, just like the others. She's waiting for someone to join her, for someone to accept their fate and become just another face in the crowd. I wish I could tell you that I'm okay, that I've found some way to fight back, some way to escape. But the truth is, I don't think I can anymore. The house has a grip on me now, tighter than I ever realized. It's inside me, like a poison, slowly seeping into every part of me, making me like them, making me one of them. I know the truth now. The house doesn't just trap you. It doesn't just haunt you, transforms you. It bends your mind, twists your very essence until you can no longer remember who you were before. You lose yourself, piece by piece, until all that's left is just another part of the house's twisted soul. Just another echo. I don't know if I can ever leave. I don't even know if I want to anymore. But I need you to understand something. You need to know what I've learned. I need to warn you to make sure that you never, ever make the same mistake I did. If you find yourself on a remote road one day, staring at a listing for an Airbnb in the woods, and you think, asterisk, it's just a house. What harm can it do? Asterisk, stop. Don't ignore that voice in your head that tells you something's off. Don't dismiss the feeling that tells you there's something wrong with the place. Because if you ignore it, if you step through that door, the house will find you. It will find your soul, your fear, and it will drag you down into the darkness with all the others who came before. And once it has you, once you've crossed the threshold, you'll never leave. You'll become part of the house, and the house will become part of you. I don't know if anyone will ever read this. I don't know if anyone can even hear me anymore. But I need to get this out. I need someone to know the truth, even if it's too late for me. So listen closely. The house is waiting. It's always waiting. And if you think you can walk away from it, you're wrong. Because once you step inside, it's not just a place. It's a trap. A trap for your soul, for your very existence. And if you're unlucky enough to stay, you'll find out what I already know. The house will never let you go. It will consume you, twist you, and make you part of its darkness. Forever.